Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and my guest this week is Carol, who's 62 years old and who grew up with home-cooked meals and very little fast food. She had a big family and everyone had to share with everybody else. And sweets or candy were like an exception, a special treat. It wasn't until later in her life that Carol started to have problems with food and her weight. She began to overeat, especially sweet and salty foods. And her weight climbed higher and higher. So much so, in fact, that her healthcare provider suggested that she take the drug Ozempic. Listen to Carol's story about how cutting sugar saved her taking the drug and thousands of dollars. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. All right, here's my chat with Carol. All right, so today I'm talking with Carol. Carol, can you tell us a little bit about your background with food and especially sugar?
Sure, I would love to do that. So I am currently 62 years old, the tail end of the baby boom generation. I grew up in Chicago in a very large family, and my grandmother lived with us as well. So we had 9 people around the table on any given night. We had home cooked meals on the regular. Fast food wasn't really a thing yet, although McDonald's had popped up down the road. We, as far as having like dessert after dinner and things like that, we once in a while had like a pudding or a tapioca, maybe Jello, but it wasn't a big thing after dinner. And we also served family style. So if we took it, we were expected to eat it. Things were not doled out to us and expected to sit and eat there, but that was the kind of the staple. If you took it, you ate it. As far as growing up with a lot of sugar, I would say probably, but not. We did not have free reign. There wasn't a lot to go around. Okay, so there was no hoarding available. You had to share with everybody else. I do recall earning allowance where I could go to the penny candy store down the block and maybe buy 5 pieces of candy with my nickel allowance. I think I tapped out in my childhood at like $1 allowance.
Wow.
And so, of course, you would buy candy or something sweet with that. But by and large, it was, we had ice cream cone here and there, but it wasn't over the top. And, I started thinking about it. We didn't really have processed food in our house, but then I got to thinking about it and I'm like, well, I think we did. There was, canned soup, there was peanut butter, there was a lot of things like that, bread, that really now I look at it as a processed food, but back then we didn't have like they have now in the stores. So, I think that, it was, when I was growing up, in my family, I was the heaviest one and the only heavy one. And I would say just more plump, than really
Mhm.
heavy. So I wasn't looked at like, oh, a real anomaly, but it was enough to get me some unfavorable nicknames, which, were very, very hurtful growing up.
Yeah.
So, that has always been the case. I'm short, so I'm 5'1", so I never carried anything very well. But that's kind of how I grew up. And, on or around age 11, we moved from Chicago to Minnesota. And, that's always hard on kids. But yeah, I really persevered. It was okay. I look at it now and look back. I'm like, oh, I'm glad we made that move. I think I'm a better person for it. So I made friends. I was happy, but always on that heavier side, but was never bullied in school about it. I was active. I was in sports, volleyball and tennis and things like that. So it was something that was always there and a part of me. And I don't recall being a sneaky eater then. That came much later in life. I didn't
Uh-huh.
realize that I could do that. But of course, I always enjoyed food and probably always way more than I should have had. And I mean, I think that as I matured and grew up, I started thinking and seeing these magazine covers and that would kind of talk about diets and all of the things. And I have experienced a lot of different the diet culture,
Yeah.
and I use that word a lot now, so thank you.
Yes.
um, and I also experienced an eating disorder probably between the grades of eighth and ninth grade, and I just stopped eating, basically. I mean, I didn't know about eating disorders. My mother surely didn't. I just stopped. I mean, I had like a half an apple and a bowl of puffed wheat or something like this in the morning, and really didn't eat much more. I'm sure I was insufferable to live with at that time. Um,
Can you just tell us why you stopped eating?
I am sure I just felt a pressure to not be as big as I was. Even though I was not overtly overweight, I was definitely on the bigger size. And so I thought, well, why not? I can lose weight. I can do this. I'm going to stop the teasing, from my family. It was really just a couple of brothers, but it wasn't from friends and things. So I was very successful at that. And I had a really good friend who's a good friend today, and actually also going to be part of the story in the end, who was like, you probably are too thin, which I was too thin. And so our solution was to go to the store and buy me a candy bar. And so so that candy bar became the thing that I was going to get better with. This is crazy. And so I would take a few bites, maybe a day, and then, and for as the story goes that after that it was all bets are off, and I gained weight, and I remember that being a little more difficult because now when I went back to school, it was like, oh, who's this now? So it was intense.
Okay.
And
How old were you at that point?
I was probably about 13 to 14 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I never had an eating disorder, in air quotes, again. However, I have had disordered eating my whole entire life. So,
Good
um,
distinction.
yeah,
Yes.
I think it was different in that I never was hospitalized and things like that, but I just had a messed up eating cycle forever. Um, I just, and then as I grew up, I got married fairly young, like at age 22. At that point, and I had picked up smoking when I was about 14, and 14 to 22, I was a smoker. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I quit cold turkey smoking, never smoked again in my whole entire life. And I was very proud of that. So I knew I had willpower, and I've always had willpower to do things, but I could not conquer this. And so when I quit smoking, then I had 4 kids in a short amount of time, and that didn't help weight matters at all. I remember hearing something recently where we make sure that mothers take their vitamins and don't
Mm-hmm.
smoke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cared what I was eating because obviously you're eating for two. I always told my son he grew up on the Dairy Queen Blizzard because that's the year that they came out, and I had lots of them.
Okay.
And so that was bad. Every pregnancy was just so much more weight, and it was difficult. And then my husband ended up leaving, not because of my weight, but left me with very young children, just in kindergarten on down.
Oh, wow.
So during that midsection, young section of my life, and I'm sure I ate over all of that stress and change in my life. But I'm a fighter as well. As the youngest in the family, I was tough. I mean, I was out to prove everybody wrong about anything. And so I made sure that this was not going to define me. I was going to, persevere. And I did. I really did. Made it something of myself and got a good job. Had a good career. I'm a people pleaser and an overdoer. So there's some things that I'm still working through on that. But it was, so that divorce was, a long time ago. It was over 30 some years ago already. And at the time I was a stay-at-home mom. I needed to get a job. And yeah, there was just a lot of food consumption during those years. And while it was traumatic, I've never really been one to feel like poor me or like a victim. I've just always tried to rise above it because I was like, this is not going to, it's going to impact me, and it's sad, but it is not going to be, define me for the rest of my life. And, I ended up marrying somebody about 5 years later who I had no children and just was like, yes, I'll take you all in. And
Wow.
it's been wonderful. Just a wonderful human being. So sometimes good things come out of these messes that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always expected life's not to be perfect. There's going to be things, and it's how you react to them. And so it was, then, just through life, as far as weight and sugar goes and food. I mean, I was the sweet and salty, overeating type of person, and it just got out of control. But I was really good at, hey, there's a wedding coming up in 6 months. Hey, I've got a vacation coming, or I would plan. I'm a hiker and a biker as well, and so those two things I love when people say, oh yeah, they're hikers. I'm like, oh, cool. They think I'm a hiker. But I always ended up doing it way heavier than I needed to. I just, even though I could get down and lose some pounds, it was never, really good enough. And I would always spiral back after the hike or after the bike ride or whatever it happened to be, the wedding. And it never stuck. And I would always say, this could be so much easier on me if I could just have lost more weight. And I have always been considered obese.
Okay.
I've been to morbidly obese for my height. I could never get to those markers where they say, oh, if you're 5'1", you should be between 115, 120 pounds. And so automatically I feel like a failure because I could never get there ever. And even with the Weight Watchers program and all of the others, it just was not working for me. And so I just, I would just kept doing my own thing. And, so as I don't know, I always felt bad about this piece that I could not get a hold of in my life.
Your weight.
The weight, it was just constant. And, I've got every size of clothing in my closets, and just so many different thoughts. And as I started discovering your podcast and learning about the effects of sugar, I was drawn to the fact that I think about food all the time. It was the food thoughts that were consuming me at my every single waking moment. And the moment I woke up, I wonder if anybody's gotten that leftover pizza in the fridge. I eat that for breakfast. Who doesn't do that? Leftovers for breakfast were just a part of what I did. And so it was, that's what it was, the consuming thoughts of, when am I going to eat? Am I going to get enough to eat? All the things that people have been talking about on the podcast. And I resonated with it so very much that I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I thought about it all the time and did not know why. I didn't know why. And then as the years go on, and I just progressively, just did terrible things with food that I'm not proud of. Just whether it was the sneaky eating, hoarding, taking more than I should, just wanting to hide it all and not have it on, the top of the table. And so now my rule is, everything I eat is on top of the table. It is in the open. There is no sneaky eating. I should be proud of what I'm eating and putting into my body for reasons other than getting more than my fair share. And so that is something that I've been doing. And so there's just been a lot of things that have happened. I mean, I had, like, my mother growing, like, I don't fault her for anything with how we grew up or what she did. That's all she knew. But I would say it was pretty controlled. My dad, and they got divorced after like 25 years. My dad was not a very kind man. And I would say that, unfortunately, now that he has passed, probably the thing he said to me that was the most hurtful. And I was like, wow, I just did not deserve that. I was 45 or 50 years old, and my sisters and I went to visit him at his home. And when I walked in the door, he said, well, it looks like you're not missing any meals. And that is what he said to me. And my sister just about came unglued. And, we probably all three should have just left at that moment, but we didn't. You don't do sometimes what you want to do. But I kept thinking, wow, that is just so hurtful for a grown woman to hear that from her father. Yes. And so, I think about things like that, and it makes me a kinder person all around when I, think back on that. But, that I still always put one foot in front of the other in my life and always moved on, no matter what has happened to me or around me. But I know now that, I'm sure I ate over all of these things in one way or the other and just couldn't get my thoughts together.
And can I just ask, what was it? Was it just this podcast that made you kind of flip that switch from overeating, sneaky eating, and all the rest of it to what is considered, or what you consider to be, more healthy eating now?
Yeah. Around probably over a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, I had discovered the keto diet, right? So I had looked into that, and that taught me a lot too, as well. It taught me some different things, just like you get a little bit here and you get a little bit there. And, it did work for me until it didn't. And so, getting back to this girlfriend of mine, who was the one that helped me eat that candy bar over a week's time, she was always the thinner of the friends. But as a lot of people, they grow and they change, and their body changes as well. But she had stopped eating sugar 25 years ago. 25 years ago, she said, I couldn't stop eating Hershey Kisses. And so she just, on her own, before there was any real discussion about it, just said, I can't do this anymore. So she said, I got to stop eating recreational sugar. So that's what she called it, which it meant the cupcakes and the ho-hos and all the candy, all of the things she stopped. Just like that. Cold turkey. Now, it didn't mean that she was looking at labels and looking at sugar contents or like she goes, I'd even have, like, if I had pancakes, I might put a little syrup on it. So it wasn't that, because she didn't feel she needed to do that. And so I got to thinking, that, wow, that's really intense. And she takes hits for that all the time. What do you mean you don't eat this and whatever? So last October, it was last October where things really started to change for me. And I'd been doing a lot of research and I was listening to some other podcasts. And I thought, you know what, there's something to this. And so, and I'd never done no sugar because I wasn't really educated about sugar. I had no idea that if I ate bread or a tortilla that was going to break down and be just like sugar. Like that was the biggest eye opener for me.
Absolutely.
And that was sort of where a lot of it started.
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. For example, this 5-star review from Laurie, who says, "This is an empowering podcast." Laurie says, "I love all the craving support and education from this excellent podcast. I always learn something new and empowering." And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
But I had gone to the doctor last October, and I had been putting off going to the doctor because why? My weight. Like you just don't want people putzing around with you when you feel so terrible about yourself, and they're going to weigh you. So, but I did go, and I got weighed, and it was well over 125 pounds. I said I'd never get over 225 pounds. I told myself I'd never get over 200 again. Of course I did. And I had my head in the sand because I don't weigh myself. And I really liked this doctor. And I had sort of a breakdown about my weight. I said, I'm very, they asked you, are you depressed? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not depressed because I've never felt depressed, but I probably was. And I said, I just don't know what to do. And I did have like a literal breakdown with tears. And I said, can you tell me about this, Ozempic? And so she told me about it. And I said, do you think that I'm a candidate for that? And I never wanted to do this. I mean, it wasn't something I wanted. I felt so hopeless and helpless at this time that's why I even brought it up. And so she goes, well, yeah, you would be. And so, but she never asked me anything more, and I really do like her, but she didn't ask me what I'd been eating or up my history or anything, or refer me to somebody if she didn't have the time at the moment to find out more information about myself. And so that day, I walked out with a prescription for this. I don't know if it was called Ozempic, but it's one of the shots.
Yeah.
And so I went straight from there to the pharmacy to fill it. And well, news to me, the world was short on this supply of Ozempic, or at least the US. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to wait a couple days or a week. Well, I couldn't get it filled for a long time. And the pharmacist said, well, if you get this filled, it's going to cost you $1,000 out of pocket because I hadn't used any of my insurance or whatever. And I said, that's fine. I mean, really? I was so desperate that I was just like, whatever it takes for me to get this. And so, but I knew I wanted to get it through a pharmacy and not online or any other off color situation. And, that made me feel better, I guess. But so then I I waited and I thought they would call me and say it's in, but never came. The call never came. And as those kind of weeks went on through all of the end of last year, through the holidays, I was unleashed on food. Like I was just eating everything in sight. I was anxious for the first time in my life. I wasn't doing things. I was just not myself. It was awful because I felt like I finally made a step to do something major about it. And that still didn't happen. Okay. And so it was very, very tough couple of months that I just went nuts eating whatever I wanted. And so over the holidays, I had some little extra time and I discovered your podcast. And I'm like, maybe what Judy was doing, my friend, was really something to it, right? And so no sugar, let me try that. So I'm, searching all these different ways and I come upon it. And I was just glued to all these different episodes. I started at the beginning, so I know what's going on. Gotcha. And just kind of kept going. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to try this. And so it was like January 6th. I didn't do it on the 1st, just I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do no sugar, no sweeteners, because I've done those and I learned they are triggers for the real deal. Okay. Yeah. And so, yeah. And then the chemicals. So sure. I've just become like educated on this, and no processed food or fast food. And I mean, that's a lot, right, to take in. And to this day, I have done it. Wow. And I am so proud of myself. And a month or so ago, I had a follow-up doctor appointment, and I couldn't wait to go to the doctor. I was like, this is unusual. I can't wait to go. And I was able to, I go in, I had to decide if I wanted to be weighed or not, because this whole time I'd not been weighed, but I had felt it in my clothes and everything in my life and the comments, and I didn't need to be weighed. And I was like, do I want them to cover it up? I decided I would be a big girl and I would see what it said. And of course there was, quite a reduction, but at the same time, it wasn't what I was hoping for, right? So those demons, they're always in you, no matter what. And so I go into my appointment, and the nurse had said, oh, do you need a refill on your Ozempic? And I said, well, I never cashed it in or whatever. I never got it. She goes, oh, well, I said, it's not available. She goes, well, it is now. You can get it everywhere. Are you sure? And I'm like, well, no, I don't know. I don't want it. I said, I don't even want it on my record anymore, that, I don't want it. And she goes, oh, she was a little surprised. So then the nurse came in, I'm the doctor, and she said, well, it looks like you're doing good. And she came in with a mindset that I had been on Ozempic. And that I have not. I never got it filled because there was a shortage. And I've done this on my own. She goes, how did you do it? And I said, no sugar, sweeteners, or processed food, fast food. And I was looking forward to saying that so much. Wow. And she was pretty excited for me. And then she told me, she goes, well, I also want to let you know that I don't get to say this very often, but you have moved down a category of an obese-ometer. Okay. So I guess there's 3 levels. And I had moved from the highest to the next level. Cool. Just a little while ago. Because of my height, it just don't take, I don't know, maybe I'll always be on it. I'm not sure.
It's not fair for us little people.
Oh my gosh, it was so exciting, to hear that, but more exciting to say, no, I did this on my own. And I am so committed. I think my rock bottom, I've hit rock bottom many times, so I know the way, but was this last January when I felt anxiety for the first time in my life. I felt despair. I was like, oh my gosh, why am I having thoughts of not worthy to be here on this earth? Why am I doing that? This is serious, Carol. You've got to do something about this, not you. And I mean, I have a bunch of grandkids, and I had scheduled, because I always schedule something out, right? So I can get in shape for something or whatever. And I had scheduled a big 5-day trip at a water park for the whole family. And I had to cancel it because I could not, I just didn't, I had just started, I had just made this promise to myself. And that was going to be an eating event, a swimming event, which I don't like anyway. And I just didn't, I needed to do this for myself. And so it was hard to cancel it because, some of the kids are old enough to know grandma just canceled the trip.
Yeah.
And it was really, I done it all for myself. And I felt good about that. This was an investment in not only my own future, but in theirs as well. I mean, I want to be able to get down and be able to get up and be with these kids and do things, be that active grandparent. And I will say, I didn't know what inflammation was. I mean, I'm sitting here Googling, what is inflammation? And one thing that I couldn't even walk. I said, I just want to be able to get up out of a chair and move and not be like, oh, or have to stop and steady myself, get moving. And I can do that now without any pain. Another thing I was going through was I had some plantar fasciitis in my heels.
Yeah.
I couldn't, in the morning, oh, it was terrible. I couldn't even walk. And I'm about week 2 of this. I got up out of bed and walked to the bathroom and no pain. And it took me a little bit to be like, why that? Oh, I must be lucky. It just went away. I'm like, no, you earned it.
Yes, amazing. Yes, because I mean, sugar is one of the most inflammatory, if not the most inflammatory food. You don't need to take anti-inflammatories. You don't need to take antioxidants or eat antioxidant foods. If you cut sugar, you're not getting any of those negative effects.
Right. And I was not educated. I just was so oblivious to all of these ramifications. I mean, when I went to the doctor and I've never been on any medication, so I'm like, that's something I really want to hold on to. I've been very blessed, but part of it is, I I mean, I feel like those were numbers that I was just as excited to see change when I went back to the doctor, uh, because now I understood them and why and what was so important about all the blood numbers and all of that. And it's not just the weight, and it's so much more than that. But your podcast, and of course, it leads me to some of the others. So I'm like, oh, it sounds like they have a podcast. Let me go listen over there. That's all I do in the car. That's all I do, and I get it started before I leave in the morning. About a 45-minute ride. So I'm like, okay, let me look for one that's at least that long, because then it gets me all the way to work, and I just feel so energized, and I'm proud of myself because this it's just been lifelong. I'm exhausted. I was just exhausted from it. And I just want to shout this from the rooftops, and not having those food thoughts, not thinking about food all the time, eating things that are whole and healthy. And my husband, I come home from work and everything's ready. He knows what to do. He's, really a gem in that department. He's got a few things of his own laying around, but they don't bother me, and he's very mindful. And the more money I spend on whole foods, well, I spent a lot more on junk food, and just the passing by the all the fast food, it's everywhere, as you know. And I mean, just the things that I've done that I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would stop and pick up fast food and walk in and there'd be a meal on the table. Well, I had to still eat it. I mean, it just, there's things that just are so shaming, and that just made you feel so terrible about yourself. And I just want to be a good example to my grandkids. I want to be able to run around and pick them up. And, all my kids live within 7 miles in 4 different towns around here. And we can ride our bikes from all of their homes and stop by in any given night. And, which is like ends up being like 30 miles or so. So it just feels good to be out there. I mean, I had told a girlfriend at work, I said, my goal for this year, this was back in January, February, I said, is to walk out my front door. Just walk out my front door and not care who's out there in the road, in the street, who might be gathered, chit-chatting, to walk to the mailbox without checking around and see who's going to see me. How do I look? How do I feel? And so the next day she brought me a plant for my front stoop. And she goes, you can look at this plant when you walk out the door. It's just things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm surrounded by people that are just struggling terrible from
Yes.
these things.
It goes way beyond your actual weight. It's to do with your self-esteem, your self-image. And yes, and even when you cut sugar and you lose the weight, that also has a ripple effect on your self-esteem in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely does. And I've been able to wear clothes I have not worn in years and years, and people are like, oh wow, you got a new outfit, and I'm sitting here like, this thing's like 12 years old. But and I feel good about that too, that I'm able to just kind of rifle through, and sometimes I'll spend hours trying on new clothes, not new clothes, but clothes that I have in my many closets, and just, oh, here's a contender. Oh, here's something I can wear. No, I don't know that I'll ever want to wear that again. Because I really do. I can't believe it that I have not had like a diet pop or anything like that since January. I just can't believe it. And the single chip, because once that bag's open, it's all bets are off. I mean, that's just how it was. And I think what bothered me about parts of the keto diet was that everything was a keto. Here's a keto recipe. Are you keto friendly? It's like, well, I'm sorry, but if I'm eating cake, I'm eating cake. Or if I'm having bread, I'm having bread. It just, and then when I learned I learned so much through your podcast and all of the guests that you have on, and just I mean, even if they're very technical, you're always bringing it back to something that I can understand and that resonates with me. Because, and I'll look up, I'm like, oh, that's a different word. I've never heard of, the word adrenal or something like this, or just different things. I'll be like, what is that? And it'll kind of lead me down. And your way of explaining it and always kind of bringing it back to the sugar, which, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's not a food group. And some of these catchphrases I find myself using in my regular daily life. Well, it's not a food group, or,
Yeah.
and I so strongly feel that it is so addictive that more has to be done. I'm good at looking at labels, and sometimes I get just darn mad because I'll think, oh, surely there isn't anything in this tuna can, no sugar. And then you turn it over and you're like, for the love of Pete, why is there sugar? Why does there have to be sugar in there?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it just makes you such a more aware consumer, a smarter consumer.
Right. Yes, I want to be smart about it. Am I perfect? No, but I'm getting, I'm smart about it.
Yes.
And I'm very aware of what could possibly trigger me. I don't, and I'm not saying there aren't fleeting things that come across like, oh, yeah, I guess that does sound kind of good. Well, then I just move on with my day, with my moment. But I feel that where I am right now just makes me so much happier than anything that I could ever put into my body. And I know I'm never going to be cured. Okay. Cause that was my problem before. Oh, I'm I'm cured. I've been doing this for a while. I lost some weight. I was successful. I think I'm good. I think I can have that donut or whatever. And you're not cured. It just, it gets easier, but you're not cured. It's still
Yes, you
there.
control it, or you learn to deal with it, or you do things so that the triggers don't happen. And it's not even about curing it, because it's
Mhm.
not really a sickness to be cured. It's
Right.
like you learn how to behave and how to organize your life so that you don't get triggered.
Right. And another thing that I learned and use a lot is it is not my fault. It is not our fault that this is so addictive because it's just everywhere. And in my own life, I could find a way for anything to have health benefits. A Snicker bar, well, it has peanuts in it and there's protein, or milk chocolate. Oh, milk. No, there's some dairy for me. Anything from like, a Cheetos or something has got cheese in it.
Sure.
I could rationalize anything to be good for me in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. It's like if a cookie is broken, well, that's
You got to
probably
put it out of its misery.
not as bad. But there's so many, too many to even name, of little things I've learned in catchphrases, and like the microbiome. I've never said that word before in my life before hearing all about it on your podcast. And so now, I mean, there's more I got to dig into with that, but it makes so much sense. That is like your brain, your second brain.
Right.
And because this one wasn't serving me so well when it came to food. So I could always use a backup.
Yeah.
And that has been, but everything from, just skin and um, just feeling overall so much better, and the outlook to be able to go and do things and feeling strong about them, and knowing that I could be ready for anything. I don't need to be 6 months in advance. I'm going to go on a hiking trip. And so I got to start now. And it was always the dread.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yes, I want to thank you really from the bottom of my heart, because you're who I started with because of the name. And I like that name.
Life after sugar.
Life after sugar, not without. I think that's a big distinction.
Exactly.
And I've sent other friends of mine to you, and so like for you and my friend Judy, who has given the sugar thing, I said, oh my gosh, she didn't even know she had the magic ticket. uh she just did it.
Yeah.
And now she's doing more, though. She said, now I'm really looking at where is this hidden in all these other things.
Yes.
So that's always a good lesson to learn. And I just want to be around for the years that I'm around. I want to enjoy my life, and I can enjoy my life without having these foods that don't serve me well. And that was I think I just heard that yesterday. I forgot what doctor you were talking to or whatever. I don't know. I get them all mixed up, happily mixed up. But it was about eating foods that serve your body well.
Yes.
That's important to always keep that in mind. And now if people want to give me a cake or something, I'm like, well, if you just bring me a good ribeye, I'd probably like that more, or something like that. But I'm very satisfied, and I just pray, that I always have the strength to carry on with this, because it just made such a difference. And by continually listening to podcasts and educating myself, it makes me stronger to see it through. So I want to thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Carol. It's very inspiring to hear your story, your path, where you are now, and that you want to be there for your grandchildren and for yourself, which
Right.
is a very inspiring place to be. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Your guests that you have, always just listening to their stories, and you want to just jump in the screen and say, I understand. That happened to me too.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Carol.
Yeah, thank you, Netta. Have a very good day.
You too. Wow, I think Carol's story is so inspiring because it goes to show that it's never too late to reduce sugar or cut sugar and improve your health. I have nothing against Ozempic, but Carol found an alternative and saved herself over $1,000 a month. And not only did she save money, she also saved her health. And sure, this may sound easier said than done. It certainly wasn't easy for me, and I know I'm not the only one. And that's exactly why I created the Freedom from Cravings Formula program. It's a program that's specifically designed for women over 50 who want to get rid of cravings and feel more in control around food, especially sugar and comfort foods. In the program, you'll get step-by-step guidance and customized support through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident in your food choices so that you can ditch the shame and embarrassment that you feel every time your emotions make you slip or fall off the wagon, and so that you never feel like you're on some kind of a restrictive diet. If you're at the stage of your life where you're finally ready to look after yourself, let's chat. You can hop on a free clarity call with me at any time by going to aftersugarclub.com and clicking on the big green button, Schedule a Clarity Call. We'll have a quick 30-minute one-on-one chat where you'll be able to tell me more about your challenges and goals, and we'll be able to see how the Freedom from Cravings Formula program can help you. So go to aftersugarclub.com. Speak soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.